what do you see as the most significant mindset shift that a new deputy head needs to make in order to thrive rather than simply survive?
I think that's, do you know, I think an interesting place to start with that is probably what the shift isn't, because I hear a lot of people talk about, oh, the biggest shift is that you've kind of got this really different relationship with everybody now. You've got to hold people to account more, and that requires a bit more distance, etc. I'm just that's certainly not been my experience. I think that as you go up the sort of educational leadership ladder, as it were, I think that relationships are central to everything, right the way through. And I think that the relationships are ultimately rooted in authenticity and vulnerability, which are like two big things that we try and write about in the book. And so I don't think I'd necessarily align with this view that like you have to suddenly change your relationships with people when you become a deputy or become a senior leader of any kind. I don't think it's necessarily got to be different from the relationships you had with them when you were a middle leader. I think probably in some ways the biggest shift is that rather than having that natural outlet to do the things that you're talking about, you now need to create that outlet.
Because in your book, you're foregrounding the idea of people-centered leadership, and that's really basically what we've been talking about. Is there a reconciliation to do between the human slash relational side and the role of deputy, where you've got this almost relentless accountability and the demands that come with it of the operational side?
Where we really landed on was talking about kind of relational accountability and the concept of kind of shared endeavor. And like Adam said, if accountability is often mistaken for a process of or a mechanism for judgment and consequences, you're going to have a culture of judgment and consequences. You haven't done it by this date, therefore this is the consequence of that. And I'm not very happy with you. And then all of a sudden you have the teachers are upset, just like the children are upset because they've been told off because they haven't done their job in time. And part of our job is to enable and foster that sense of psychological safety. Make sure, you just had an episode on that, how important psychological safety is to everybody in the building. Admitting mistakes, taking those risks without fear of negative consequences, but looking at the shared endeavor and saying that we can have a reconciliation of that by having that shared accountability for processes and for outcomes. But it's done through kind of saying it's outcome driven rather than, it's not outcome driven, it's process driven, right? So if you make it process driven and it's iterative, it fails to become outcome driven, and you open up this possibility of joy of other things happening. Oh, we didn't expect this to be the consequence of this aim. Oh, haven't we found a much better thing because we've invited it's kind of that stacked teams idea that Shane Leaning and Ephraim Lerner talk about in their book Change Starts Here, that idea that don't just top slice the teams, take everybody, every stakeholder from your culture and your setting and put them into the team to make that decision.
But I think, Chris, you've already mentioned sort of the people you drew on, and my understanding is that you used lots of case studies and real examples throughout the book. Was there a story or scenario that you thought best captures the essence of effective deputy headship? And is there anything listeners should really take from that story, from that case study?
Yeah, there was one that really stuck out. We were very lucky to be able to reach out to some really influential voices that were able to give us some opinions and some viewpoints, either outside of school system or within school systems. Spoke to a couple of deputy heads who had kind of worked their way up. One of the people we spoke to was Gwyn ap Harry, who is the CEO of the XP Trust, which is a set of outstanding schools up in Northumbria, Cumbria, that neck of the world, quite north. And he gave us a story about how kind of power can corrupt. It's a bit like Macbeth, to be honest with you. He kind of offered his deputy CEO the role of CEO, and his deputy stepped up, and he kind of misread. It's kind of talking about what I was talking about earlier. He just entrusted his deputy without asking for physical proof, because the answer was always, "Oh, do you not trust me?" kind of thing. And he realized that having that kind of transactional relationship was important because he didn't do the checks and balances. It's kind of like the the warning story that comes at the end of all these positive things we're saying, because if left unchecked, if this deputy head, as a deputy head, if you're sat there carving out this space for yourself, if you are carving too deeply and too quickly, and you aren't looking after those relationships, and you aren't doing 360 checks, and you aren't checking in with your head teacher, you'll end up like the story Gwyn was telling, where he had to come back as CEO because it nearly destroyed the trust. And he talks about this openly in the book. He talks about it openly in another podcast as well. And we just reached out to him and said, would you like to offer any advice? And he's it's quite early on in the book, and it's a bit of a shot across the bows to talking about kind of unchecked power, which is what it is. Leadership is a type of power. Whether you are a person leader and you're like, I'm sharing it all, you still have it to give out. And if you don't want to share that, you can keep it to yourself and just walk around and go, I can exclude you, if I wanted to. I don't think there's any deputies in the land that are like that, but you could. And that really hit home for me, because it was like a really good non-example of how not to be a deputy, which we found quite original and quite a unique take, because in the end, ambition and blind ambition, even if it was for the good of the school, moved so far from the original intent and the school and the system and the culture and the society and the community that Gwyn had built, that it damn near destroyed it. And so I think there's any deputies or people going, I really want to be a deputy, sometimes looking at the why you want that leadership. I really wanted to be a head teacher, but it wasn't because I wanted to run a school. It was because I had lots of ideas about how to work with everybody. I was excited. Yes, it was a nice personal opportunity to get that promotion, to have that ability to continue to shape a culture and go, let's continue the legacy. It wasn't, I can't wait to be head teacher so I can change everything because I'm in power now. And actually, in a way, I was a bit reticent about the whole thing, which I think is a good sign. I didn't run into it going, I'm the boss, because it's a job that's doing its best to end my not very long life so far.
Do you have any advice for anyone who's aspiring to headship, and about how they can best use their deputyship as a period of deliberate professional growth, rather than just preparation for the next level?
I'd agree with everything you said there, Chris. I think about, the kind of intentionality of what you do as a deputy to prepare you for what comes next. And I think, Kieran, you were saying about it being a springboard. I think sometimes, though, being a deputy is a really good space for you to be in, to try and figure out what the next thing for you to do is. And you said, Kieran, that when you were a deputy, you kind of quite quickly realised you didn't want to be a head. I think what I realised in my time as a deputy in my current school is that I really, really would have wanted to be the head at that school. And my school definitely made the right choice in picking the head teacher that they did instead of me. She's a much better head teacher than what I would have been. But I really wanted to be the head teacher in that school. I'm not sure I certainly don't have yet the same kind of burning urge to be a head teacher anywhere else. It was very much about that community. And, I know Chris's community is super important to him as well. And I think actually that reflecting on Chris being the head teacher in his school and me applying for the headship in my school actually really helped me to think, actually, those are two examples of like really needing to be in the right place. So perhaps deputy headship isn't about like find your next role, but maybe it is more about find your next place, or find the place that you want to be in. And if you're in that place as head teacher, happy days. If you're in that place as deputy, like absolutely fine. But I think, it definitely does give you the space to think, right, what kind of organization, what kind of community do I want to work in? And then worry about the role afterwards, I would say.